بیننده‌های عزیز سلام. در این برنامه گفتگوی دارم با آقای عبدالله درداری، نماینده برنامه توسعه‌ای سازمان ملل در افغانستان. Mr. Abdullah, welcome to the program.
Thank you for hosting me today.
Thank you. You conducted an assessment on socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 in Afghanistan. What are your findings generally?
Well, you see, this is the fourth assessment. In the first assessment, we looked at the direct impact of the immediate shock of COVID-19, where we concluded that the impact for 2020 will be a drop in GDP by about 5.5 to 6% in GDP, and an increase in poverty to around 67 to 69% from 55% pre-COVID-19. In order to reduce the impact of COVID-19, we looked at direct cash transfers to everyone in the working age. We looked at direct cash transfers to everyone above 65 years old. We looked at cash transfers to what we call cash for work programs for people in the age between 18 and 65. So different types of social protection schemes. We looked into that in details. The third note was about the impact of COVID-19 on the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals in Afghanistan. And clearly, we concluded that COVID-19 will negatively impact the possibilities of attaining the SDGs by the year 2030, and that the additional cost to achieve SDGs in Afghanistan would be around $300 million a year, in addition to the $250 million additional health spending that the country needs. Now, this note, the fourth note that we produce, talks mainly about the fiscal impact, the impact on the budget, on the finances of the government. On the public finance, we can see that there is also dramatic impact. You will see the average reduction in available total resources will be 16%. So there is a 16% drop in budget resources for the government in Afghanistan. Already, as you know, the situation before the COVID-19 was not very comfortable, and the fiscal space was not large in Afghanistan, and 50% of government spending came from grant aids. We also concluded that in order to maintain the pre-COVID-19 levels of public expenditure, of government expenditure, donors need to increase funding by 30%. So, and you know that as we are approaching the donor conference on Afghanistan on the 23rd, 24th November, you know that we don't expect an increase in funding, we actually expect a decrease in funding. So the challenges are important, but we also believe that there is an opportunity to increase reforms, fight corruption, and enhance government effectiveness in order to catch up with some of the losses due to COVID-19.
Right. We will come back to the reduction in funds in Geneva conference, possible reduction in funds. Which areas have been impacted or affected specifically, according to your assessments?
Well, the most impacted areas in the Afghan economy were services, transportation, especially at the phase one of the COVID-19, when trade was interrupted with neighboring countries, especially Pakistan. The other sector which was very badly affected was manufacturing. Services like trade and small businesses were very badly affected. Agriculture was negatively affected, but it was less affected than all other sectors. And I have to say that the measures of the government to ensure that food prices don't go up because of COVID-19 were successful. And so far, food price increases remain within acceptable and normal levels.
All these sectors that you mentioned, agriculture, transportation, trade, they have direct impact on economy. The COVID-19 impacts, are they long-term or they are short-term?
Well, that depends on the medical and the health scenario of the country. If, first of all, we are what we call in economics, we are a price taker. Afghanistan is a small economy in the global economy. It's only $20 billion. So it doesn't influence the world economy. It is influenced by the world economy, which means that, first of all, it will be affected by the changes in the global economy. And the first impact is the reduction in donor funding, because now donors are going to redirect most of their resources to deal with the negative impact of COVID-19 at home. And as you know, official development aid is usually a percentage of GDP. And we can see that there's almost a 20% drop in GDP globally. So funding to Afghanistan will go down. That's one. The second impact is the impact of trade. Afghanistan products, exports will have smaller markets because anyway, the growth, the economic growth in destination markets for Afghan products has been reduced. The third one is disruption in imports, especially in the first few months of the pandemic, where imports into Afghanistan were affected. So we will see, we have to see what is the health scenario of the pandemic. If the pandemic is going to take an L shape, so a reduction, dramatic reduction in economy, then a long area of recession, the impact on Afghanistan will continue and will expand. We believe at the moment, with the current scenarios, that the total accumulated loss in GDP by 2024 will be around 16%. That's a lot, that's almost $6 billion. And also the big loss is that it will take Afghanistan economy at least 4 years to go back to where it was before COVID-19 in 2019. So, the big loss is that you have 4 or 5 years of growth and development in Afghanistan that is lost. So, which means that we have to work very hard, all of us, Afghan government, Afghan private sector, and international community, we have to work hard together in order to achieve a rapid recovery after this pandemic.
Right. In order to return back to the pre-COVID situation economically, what capacities do you see within the country and what capacities do you see in the international assistance?
First of all, I'm sure you know that Afghanistan has a number of very, very important resources. Its young, dynamic population that has increased in educational levels in the past 20 years. So you have a human resource that still needs development, but it provides Afghanistan with a solid base for growth. Afghanistan has almost $1 trillion worth of natural resources that's not being exploited. And also, most importantly, Afghanistan has a geographical position, which is, in our opinion, and I'm happy to, this morning I heard His Excellency the President saying that this is the real gold of Afghanistan, its geographical position. We estimated through our modeling that an improvement in the economic situation and in the security situation in Afghanistan and the reduction of the cost of trade between Afghanistan and its neighbors would give this country 4 percentage points of GDP growth. So this is a huge area of investment. We believe that an improvement in collecting taxes and excise on extractive industry would bring to the country another 1 or 2 percentage points of GDP. We believe that enhancing exports through export finance will give the country another 1.5 percentage points of GDP. So what the work that UNDP is doing is to provide the government with all these scenarios and policy proposals to demonstrate that the country can recover from COVID-19. And the most important way to recover is to improve the efficiency of national institutions, is to make sure that corruption is being beaten, because it cannot continue as it is today.
Talking about corruption, the Afghan government has started coronavirus relief packages. The program, the bread distribution program, which was faced with corruption allegations. How much successful the Afghan government has been in this campaign?
Well, as I told you before, I'm looking at the macro picture. And what we see from our measurement and our indicators is that the most important thing in a crisis like this, my friend, is to make sure there isn't a dramatic spike in food prices, because that's where there will be tensions, social tensions, security problems, demonstrations probably, or even riots. This is what the experience is around the world. The government of Afghanistan successfully maintained food prices at acceptable levels. Now, I am not in a position to go into the details of what happened in this program or that program. I am giving you the overall view because UNDP was not involved in that particular program.
Right. Have you assessed the impacts of coronavirus on private entities, the private sector in the country?
Yes. In fact, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, produced a very interesting report about the impact of coronavirus on small and medium enterprises. And the impact could actually, if coronavirus continues, the impact could be tremendous on laying off workers and closing of a large number of these small and medium enterprises. And this we can see already. We can see an increase in unemployment to above 50% of the population, the working age population. So, and since this is an economy, 95% of Afghanistan economy is made up of formal and informal small and medium enterprises, the impact is tremendous. And that's why UNDP is starting now to set up a fund to provide funding, small loans to small and micro and medium enterprises, especially the ones owned by women, because we believe engaging women in the economy would be one of the best and fastest ways for economic recovery.
Is it provided through your organization or through the government?
We are at the moment finalizing the design of this work. Our organization, of course, will be involved. We are looking for a financial institution that can provide those loans. We would like also to mobilize a lot of resources around this fund from donors, from private investors, and so on. So this is going to be like an example of how we can move forward in the near future. Because as I said, grants are going down. Aid is going down. So we need new ways of funding and financing development. And this would be innovative financing. This would be private sector. This would be access to finance to SMEs in Afghanistan.
What has been the role of your organization during the pandemic in Afghanistan?
UNDP has, well, let me say that UNDP manages something called the Global Fund. The Global Fund is an international coalition to fund the fight against malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV. So we already had a well-established infrastructure for medical services when COVID-19 hit Afghanistan. In fact, most of the laboratories that tested COVID-19 were UNDP established laboratories. In addition to that, UNDP mobilized around $23 million in order to support the Ministry of Health in designing and implementing mobile and fixed clinics to deal with rapidly with the cases. It provided millions of pieces of PPE and disinfectant and all of that so that the health workers are protected. And now we also provided the police force with equipment, and we just 2 days ago The first police hospital dedicated for COVID-19 was opened in near Jalalabad, 50 beds with 10 intensive care units, and we are going to open 3 more such hospitals in the next few weeks. So this is very tangible. We, after the WHO, are the largest donors in the UN system to Afghanistan in facing COVID-19.
Right. Have you assessed the health sector?
We did not have actually big activities in the health sector from a policy perspective. But because of the COVID-19 and the experience we are learning now, it has become clear to the government and to us that we need to work on the health system in general, and we need to make sure that health is related to the overall Sustainable Development Goals strategy of Afghanistan. So the Ministry of Public Health now has become an implementing partner of our program for Sustainable Development Goals integration in Afghanistan economy.
Right. You mentioned about the 6 billion increase in need for Afghanistan. Do you think the international community...
It's $6 billion accumulated loss in GDP.
Yes. Do you think the international community will pledge to fill the gap for Afghanistan in the upcoming conference in Geneva?
Well, let's hope so. But I have to say that I think the government of Afghanistan, today again, His Excellency the President was very clear in expressing Afghanistan's understanding that aid will not take place as per before. Those days are over. The days of unlimited aid to Afghanistan are over. And by the way, this could be a good thing. A reduction in resources require all of us, government, UN, and donors, to make sure that every dollar counts. And now Afghanistan needs to make sure that it reforms its institutions, enhances its public finance management, makes sure that the policies are integrated and not scattered. Economic policy, social policy, and environmental policies are all interrelated so that $1 can have a maximum impact on all of these sectors.
Do you think it is the right time for reduction in aid by the international community?
This is not how I would see it. I would say, do we have another choice? If sooner or later, that generosity of aid was going to recede. It's happening now because of COVID-19. Now Afghanistan can say, I understand COVID-19 hit advanced economies like it has hit least developed economies. And we should seize this opportunity to change some of the ways we do business in Afghanistan, to change some of the ways we manage state institutions, change some of the ways we manage the market in Afghanistan, and move forward in a more independent, more self-reliant economy. And I think this is the vision of the leadership and the people of Afghanistan.
Do you think, are we there to even get the reduced fund from the international community in the conference?
Afghanistan will get funding in the conference, there's no doubt about that. By how much, it's a question of to be decided in the conference. If you look at the Afghanistan Peace and Development Framework that the government is presenting to the conference, you will see a much more advanced development thinking. You will see much more commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. You will see much more commitments to the achievements of Afghanistan in women's rights, democracy, institutions, and the principles of the Republic. And therefore, I think donors do appreciate that effort by the government. And at the end of the day, donors has invested blood and treasure in Afghanistan, and they are not going to abandon this country. I can assure you that donor and the UN are not going to abandon Afghanistan, and we will continue very serious work and partnership with the Afghanistan people and government.
Right. Coming back to your report, you made some recommendations for the government. What are those recommendations?
Well, we proposed few reforms in the collection of taxes. We proposed new taxes not to the people, new taxes to the extractive sector. We proposed enhancing the collection of tariffs of imports coming to the country. You know, unfortunately, because of ineffective management and corruption, a large part of the revenues of the imports coming to Afghanistan is not coming to the government treasury. And we feel that by combining all of those and by enhancing the fight against corruption and by enhancing the trade with the region and by enhancing exports through export finance and facilitation, Afghanistan can cover a large part of the losses it incurred and prepare itself for an effective recovery after that.
What role will you have in applying those recommendations?
Well, we are ready and we are preparing ourselves actually in order to provide capacity development, institutional support, funding when needed, and within, of course, the mandate of UNDP. We are a development agency and not a development bank. Of course, the World Bank and the Asia Development Bank are also play leading roles in this. And in coordinating between the government and the donors and mobilizing funds from the donors, like what we did with 4 police hospitals, where we mobilized funds from a large number of donors in order to transmit this fund to the police hospitals. So we are there, we are preparing ourselves. We have restructured ourselves in the country office here in Afghanistan to be fit for purpose for this new era of challenge and opportunity.
Of course, you have shared the recommendations with the government. What was the feedback?
Well, I'm happy to say that the initial feedback, which is only yesterday, is very positive, very responsive, and we are taking all these recommendations to the pledging conference in Geneva, because they are part of the official document that UNDP is going to present at that conference. And after the conference, we will all return here, and this is where the real work will start. We will roll up our sleeves and sit down with our partners in government and the private sector and civil society in Afghanistan to implement these recommendations that are agreed to by the government.
Right. As the last question, do you think a new wave of coronavirus will hit the country and the economy?
The prediction of coronavirus scenarios is the specialization of the Ministry of Public Health and WHO. When those two institutions inform us of the scenarios, we also start planning economic projections, impact on poverty, impact on sustainable development goals. Globally, we can see another wave is coming. Is it happening in Afghanistan? We don't have the numbers yet to talk of another high wave, but we have to be ready, and we are observing and we are preparing, and we are also started to prepare for the vaccine, because the vaccine, when it comes, it needs infrastructure, needs cooling and refrigerating, transportation and delivery systems that we need to prepare from now in order to ensure the vaccine reaches every citizen in Afghanistan.
Mr. Abdullah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Thank you.